Welcome to Inside the Mind, a podcast hosted by myself, Jennifer Forster, and my beautiful co-host, Allie. We're excited to be here, diving into edgy, raw, and relatable conversations woven together with mind-blowing questions that will shake up your model of the world, expand your thinking, unravel your beliefs, tease apart your patterns, and walk you to the very edges of everything you've ever believed about yourself.
As NLP trainers, coaches, entrepreneurs, we will be traversing the topics of business, relationships, money, family, spirituality, leadership, and personal growth, all through the discerning lens of NLP, ancient teachings, and a healthy sprinkling of womanly wisdom. One thing we believe to be true is that if we want a different outcome, we must be willing to ask a different question. And the answers to those questions are always inside the mind. Welcome to another episode of Inside the Mind. I'm Allie May, and this is my beautiful co-host, Jennifer Forster. Jen 5-star.
Jen 5-star, to those that know that I am in fact 5 stars. Yeah.
You're beyond 5 stars, baby.
I am beyond 5 stars. It's universal. When you hang around with me, it's a universal experience. Oh my goodness. Strap in today. It's a big episode, and you can already hear, probably through our voices, that there's some big juju coming through on this one.
Yeah, I think we might trigger some people, activate some people.
Mm-hmm.
We might piss some people off.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our intention.
No, and our invitation, allow yourself to be pissed off, triggered, and needled by this episode. Because I say that with love, because if we're willing to have a look at our triggers, at our activations, at the things that, are like 1,000 tiny pins sticking into us, there's growth for us there. There is always growth for us if we're willing to turn the spotlight onto our trigger versus turning the spotlight out onto what's triggering me.
Exactly. And that's when we really get into self-responsibility.
Yeah, our favorite thing, self-responsibility. So today is all about relationships and specifically, what are the 3 big red flags in relationships, Allie?
Well, we have our birds singing in the background as well. Just want to welcome them in for today's call.
So if you've noticed our birds singing in the background, we actually very methodically and specifically I didn't want them tuned out. We didn't want them taken out of the audio. There they are now.
Yeah.
We love them. We feel that they bring a beautiful grounded experience to the wisdom that we're sharing across the sound waves of all of the platforms upon which you may be listening right now. So let's dive in. Relationships.
All right.
What are the 3 red flags?
The 3 red flags that we feel are the biggest at the moment, that are the most talked about throughout social media, in, I guess, conversations with people around relationship, is narcissism.
Yep.
We have codependency.
Yep.
And we have, what's our third one?
Gaslighting.
Oh, it's not even in my vocabulary. That's why I'm like, what is that one?
And in fact, for me, apart from seeing them on Instagram and social media and Facebook, and they're just so prolific. Those 3 words are so prolific. Narcissism, codependency, and gaslighting. And to me, what they can do if we're not being mindful is that we can actually use them to strengthen an identity that we have inside of a relationship, which to me isn't helpful for creating a really robust, healthy, whole relationship.
Yeah, we're just putting blame on somebody else. It's like, lately I've been hearing people talk about other people in other relationships. So, for example, one of the conversations was this group of people was talking about this young guy and how much of an asshole he is and his poor girlfriend. And the conversation kept going on and on and on. And I was just like listening in the background. Then I piped up and I said, does anybody factor into this conversation that she's choosing this? Mm. You're making the guy out to be an asshole and the girl out to be a victim, yet she's choosing this.
On some level, she is absolutely choosing it.
Well, she's there. And I will bring this back to myself to bring this home even harder. I was in quite a toxic relationship back in my early 30s. And one day my dad turned around to me and he said, "You must like being treated like shit, babe." I was like, huh?
We love Les.
Oh, we love Les. We do so much. Yoda. And I was like, huh? And he said, well, you stay. And that's never left me. That was like, I was at the lowest point in my life back then. That relationship was awful. There was a lot of verbal abuse from the person I was with, some physical abuse as well. And here's the thing. Not one part of me blames him for any of that.
Yeah.
Not one part. And this is when we look at self-responsibility. This is when we look at really, really taking self-responsibility to new heights. It's if we choose something. Now, I'm not saying the behavior is great behavior. However, if we choose to be in a relationship like that, we essentially, in my model of the world, we essentially are choosing that behavior. We're tolerating it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Similar thing for me. I was in a very long 11-year relationship that had some elements that weren't serving me. And again, when I was able to do this work, really take a look at it through the discerning lens of self-responsibility, which to me is what neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, is rooted in. It's rooted in self-responsibility. That's what it's about. So when I was able to look at the relationship that I had that had elements that were completely ineffective for who I wanted to be on this planet, being in self-responsibility also meant that I got to look at it from the lens of how have I created this? What contribution have I made to this relationship being the way it is? Well, the first contribution I made was being there. I was there not because somebody had a gun to my head. I was there because I was choosing to be there. And in many ways, this might be a little polarizing or triggering, I was there in many ways with an unconscious manipulation playing out, wanting this person to be something other than the person that they were. Now, in my model of the world, that's not love. That's actually a manipulation coming from me unconsciously, because they could have been any other way. They would have been. Now, what does that do? Well, it removes the judgment and blame of they did this to me, or they did these behaviors, or they are this way. It dissolved that immediately and gave me the power to bring it back to me and ask, well, what do I choose? What do I want for myself inside of a relationship? And is it this? And it wasn't. It took me a little while to kind of crack that open and figure that out.
And when we look at perception as projection, one of our favorite topics, when we look at perception as projection, it's like what's going on within us that has us project our stuff out onto somebody else.
So let's have a little sneaky look at red flags first. So let's break these
sneaky
down.
Look. Let's have a
It's like, ooh. Let's pull back the blanket on red flags. In fact, it's not just red flags. Let's pull back the flag on the labels that we give to others and ourselves inside of a relationship.
Before we do that, I want to just share with a red flag that's downloaded for me the other day when Jen and I were talking. When we're looking for something within somebody else, we're recognizing behaviors in somebody else. What was my question? It was hang on, I have it written down. Trying to figure someone else out is just trying to figure yourself out.
Yes. Let that land. Say that again. When we are trying to figure someone else out.
And I'll change the language to attempting to, because trying is one of my least favorite words.
Yeah. We're literally just trying to figure ourselves out.
When we're attempting,
because trying is not a thing.
Yeah. And why is trying not a thing? So trying is not a thing. Trying is an easy out. Try means if I don't do the thing, then that's okay because I said I'd try. So you'll notice if I say the word try, I'll correct myself. If Jen says it, she'll correct herself.
Or Allie will correct me because she has full permission to correct me. Trying is my latest little inside my mind project.
Yes.
That I'm working on. I have a lot of little inside my mind projects that I work on a daily basis. Trying is the project I'm currently working with.
Yeah, because it's an unconscious word that comes out of your mouth a lot, right?
Yeah, to reframe. So I'm in this project of reframing. That's another subject.
Oh gosh. And I have 100 I have in a day too. Not trying and other things. So when we're attempting to figure somebody else out, this was the download for me. So I had been looking external to myself, looking at somebody else, attempting to figure out this person, attempting to figure out their behavior, someone close to me, attempting to figure out why they were doing the things that they were doing, attempting to figure out if they really liked me, all the things. And then I come to this conclusion of, well, I'm not actually attempting to figure them out at all. I'm attempting to figure myself out. I'm desiring to figure myself out. And that was such an epiphany for me. And this is where we look at perception as projection. Like if I'm not projecting, and I was projecting, attempting to figure this person out, if I just turn it inwards and have a look, like what do I see on the inside? What do I see within myself? And when I'm clean, clear, and congruent, when I'm not stuck in spaces of, what would I say, like when we clean our stuff up, when we're not stuck in old patterns and programs and blame and all the things that we can carry around, then there's a freedom within us that allows us to have the kind of relationship that we want. Is this easy? Fuck no. I've been going through something over the last 5 months, I think it is now. Jen's just been my wing woman on this. An experience with a beautiful man. I will refer to him as my lover. And for me, it's been one of my greatest growth edges, greatest journeys. Like at the start of this, my gosh, I cannot even count the amount of times I was on the phone crying to Jen. I was attempting to figure things out about myself. In every area of my life, everything makes sense. There's been a lot of, in air quotes, work done in every area of my life. And I thought it had been done in relationship too until I met this person. And then all of my stuff come to the surface, all of it. And what it's allowed me to do, all the things, instead of me putting blame external to myself, instead of me attempting to figure this person out, it's really
and label them in some way.
Yes, and labeling behaviors and all the things. It's allowed me to actually work through what's going on inside of me. What's happening within me to have me feel a certain way? What's happening inside of me that has me think a certain way about this person? Oh, we've got dogs joining us today as well. Got a lot of happy little dog bark.
We're happy to have any of the creatures, great and small, join us on this podcast.
All creatures,
All creatures, because that's one of our passions, isn't it?
Yes.
All creatures, great and small.
We love them. We do. That's a good little section here to add a plug-in to. Side note here, to Wilvos. I am a volunteer for Wilvos, Wildlife Volunteers. We are on the Sunshine Coast, and I am a possum carer.
A possum mama.
I'm a possum mama. I have 3 beautiful possums. I've had them since they were babies. One of them is about to go to the next stage in his process, his journey, before he goes to release, and then I'll have the other 2. And Wilvos are extraordinary. So if you find an animal on the side of the road, you're on the Sunshine Coast, you're listening to this on the Sunshine Coast, and you find a dead kangaroo and it's got a baby in its pouch, or you find an injured animal, you can contact Wilvos. I don't know the number off the top of my head. Type it in, WILVOS, or flick me a message and I'll send you the details.
Beautiful side note. So I want to loop back around to this conversation, because these episodes that we do for you are mini masterclasses and they're snacks. We continue to say that. So just to bring this back into context of what we're talking about. So if you are seeing red flags, if you are seeing narcissism, if you are seeing gaslighting, to us, because we live our lives through the very discerning lens of NLP, the question we would ask ourselves, what is it in me that makes this projection possible? Because the projection is I'm seeing red flags. The projection is I'm experiencing narcissism. The projection is I'm experiencing gaslighting. Now, I want to really be clear here and say and state, if you are experiencing behavior in your life that is not conducive to a wholesome, happy life, then reach out and get extra support for that. We're not laying blame or judgment here either. What we're attempting to do is offer you some tools so that you can actually take back your power in how you are viewing something, what role you may be playing in the projection of what you're viewing, because you are at some unconscious level, we all are. And then from there, being able to ask yourself a different question. So let's play with that. If we were to ask the question, what is it in me that makes this projection? Projection is just what I'm seeing in someone else, right? What is in the context of what we're talking about today? Projection could be something else, but we're keeping it to relationships today. So what is it in me that makes this projection possible? And then when we can answer that question, we can then ask ourselves, what am I perceiving here about me? What am I perceiving here? So what makes this projection possible? And now what about that am I perceiving here about me? Now, this is honest, right? We've got to be really willing to get real honest with ourselves and go inwards. And I'll just complete this, and then, Allie, I want you to add in the pieces you've got. And then from there, we get to ask the third piece. So now I'm looking at what I'm perceiving about myself, and then I get to ask myself, where am I doing this in my life? Now, you may not be doing it in the same way, in the same area, but ask yourself, where am I doing this in my life? Do you want to flip on in on that?
Yeah, I do want to add a couple of key things. I love your sensory acuity. Jen just looked at me. It was just like a flicker in me, and Jen's like, "Yep,
yeah,
I'll come back, Allie."
Yeah,
I do want to preface a couple of things here. Jen you just touched on it before.
Mm-hmm.
There is no excuse for abuse in relationships, and
Zero.
We're not
Zip nada,
and we're not condoning
ever
that kind of behavior. However, in our model of the world and in the beautiful work body of NLP, we do not do labels. And when we do not do labels, we take the box away from people. And, one of the
precepts,
key pillars of NLP is that the person is not their behavior.
Yeah.
So people can have behaviors that feel like shitty behaviors. And we always have a choice in that. Now, when I say always, sometimes
it doesn't, it might not feel like we have a choice.
I know for myself, I'll just bring it back to the previous relationship, not my last relationship, but one I had when I was in my early 30s. If I take it back to there, I was at the lowest point of my life. I didn't know how to get out of that. I was drowning. I felt like I was drowning. My self-confidence was like it couldn't go any longer. It hit the floor. I didn't know who I was anymore. I lost my identity. I developed new identities of who I was and who I was as a person. Like it was covered over by so much hurt and just so many different parts in that relationship. So we're not saying that it's an easy thing to get out of a relationship if you're experiencing something that you're going to label, some behavior that you're going to label. It's not always an easy thing. And also what I just like to put in here is that we do most of the time have a choice whether we stay or whether we leave. And we also have free will to decide how we are viewing that person.
Yeah. So what we're sharing with you today, beautiful humans, is to help you to take back some power in your decision making, in your choices, and in how and what you're perceiving or viewing about what's happening outside of you.
Yeah, and to take this to a different layer, for me, so we play out patterns and programs, right? We just do that. And then we project those patterns and programs out onto other people with beliefs. There's so many different things. And for me, one of my biggest patterns, one of my beliefs was that I wasn't deserving of love. I wasn't worthy of love. I wasn't lovable. That's what it was. It wasn't the first two. I wasn't lovable. And so I played out beautiful situations in my life where I proved to myself that I wasn't lovable. And so it was easy for me to, if I wanted to say, well, there we go again. There's another shitty relationship. I'm just not lovable. Now, what we can look at secondary gain here. These are unconscious behaviors that we play out, and the secondary gain piece can be just to prove ourselves right in how we feel about ourselves. So when we are clean, clear, and congruent, when we do this body of work, when we study this body of work, NLP, timeline therapy, it allows us to shift the patterns, the programs, the distortions, what's in the way of us having what we truly want. And if we have a fuck ton of baggage surrounding relationship, I don't know anything else that will clean it up like timeline therapy will. It's like when we are so stuck in it, it's like, I use this metaphor and I use this in general. I'm going to specify it for relationship. Imagine having a 100-kilo backpack on and you have every single relationship experience that you've ever had in your life. And every morning you get up and you put that backpack on your shoulders and you carry it around for the day. It can be a relationship when you were a kid. It can be with your dad, your mom. It can be with anybody, with childhood friends, with intimate partners, all throughout your life. Every experience that you've ever had, the shitty stuff is in a backpack that you carry around day in, day out. Timeline therapy allows us to unhook that metaphoric backpack so we have a clear lens. While we're carrying that 100-kilo backpack, we're murky, we're foggy. We don't think as clean and clear as we can. We have distortions going on in our being where our judgment of things might be clouded, where our beliefs might be a little bit skew-if, where our projections can make meaning out of things and say, he or she is narcissistic. He or she is XYZ. When we clean up what's inside of us, we no longer project outside of ourselves those things that are hurting us on the inside.
Yeah. So to bring some summary to what we've just shared.
I'm not finished.
Have you got more?
Well,
I wanted to just bring some summary to where we're at so that we can
perfect
bring it to a close. So
yes,
to summarize all the pieces that we've just shared. I'm going to go with what we're not saying and what we are saying. So we're not saying that physical, mental, emotional abuse doesn't exist in relationships or in human beings, full stop. It does. What we are saying, however, is how we choose to perceive that, how we choose to view that, and how we choose to label that. That is something we do have power with. That is something we do have control over. So that's the first piece. Once we can start to understand that whatever we are seeing outside of ourselves is a projection of what may be existing inside of ourselves, when we can begin to start to look at the world through that lens instead of this is always happening to me. I just want to add a piece in. This came in while you were talking. It left and now it's come back. I'm going to add a piece in here. If we are experiencing the same thing in multiple relationships, if you've had multiple relationships and you are experiencing the same thing, for example, the label of narcissism. I experience narcissism in this relationship, this relationship, this relationship, this relationship, this relationship. Or you might even have the experience of, I see red flags and ignore them. I did it in this relationship, this relationship, this relationship, this relationship. Or you might have the experience of, I always experience gaslighting. Every relationship I've been in always ends up with me being gaslit. So if you can hear yourself saying those things repeatedly and the pattern is occurring through multiple relationships, the thing that I would like to bring forward is, what's the common denominator in this scenario? Is it what's happening outside of us, or is there something inside of each and every one of us that is having that experience recreate over and over and over and over again? And through NLP, timeline therapy, we live with the school of thought that we are creating that in some way through a perception that we have, that we are projecting out into the world so that we can relive that experience, so that we can be right, that we're right, that, for example, I'm not lovable.
Mic drop. That was great. Little piece that just downloaded for me then was, people can't be any other way than how we label them.
People cannot be. Can you just say that again? I went to say it and it landed in my being. I got goosebumps. Whoa, that was like a smack in the chops.
People can't be any other way than how we label them. It is us who labels somebody else. And you know what I love, when people come and study with us, they will often go back out into the world and go, my partner's changed, my child's changed. And it's like, no, they haven't. You've changed. So we talk about every second we can take in 134 bits of information. That's on average. There can be more. It's just the average school of thought is we take in 134 bits of information every second out of like 7 million, 11 million, whatnot. That's when our internal model of the world shifts and changes, when our perception changes, then what we see external to ourselves changes. So if we think we go and do some work and we go, oh my God, my partner's changed. No, baby, you've changed.
No, my beautiful friend, you have changed how you're perceiving that person. You can no longer perceive them in the same way when your internal model of the world shifts and changes.
Yeah.
So if you, I don't think I need to go any deeper on that. That's perfect. Beautiful.
I have one other little bit that I'd like to put out there, which keeps downloading.
Oh, bring it on in, baby. Bring it on in. We love these little downloads. Just so you all know, we can never remember anything about these episodes, can we?
No.
Ever. Which is how we kind of know that they're channel downloads when we start talking about this stuff.
Yeah, we believe that Inside the Mind, the podcast, is its own identity. It's got its own heartbeat. And we are just the
custodians, the conduit.
Yeah, and the energetics, we'll go a little bit esoteric here, and the energetics of Inside the Mind, the podcast, flow through us, which is quite fascinating to both of us. We go through our show notes to just do the editing and check over after our podcast manager has put them together, and we're like, huh? Who said that?
Who said? Did our podcast manager just script that out? Because it's really good. And then we listen back and we go, oh no, I'll go, oh, Allie, you said that. Or Allie will go, oh, Jen, you said that. And I'm like, whoa, what the flippin' heck? Like it blows our minds. It really blows our minds. Yeah,
it's such a truth. So yeah, the last piece that I just want to add in here is I think the marketing industry has made a really big business out of talking about red flags, narcissism
and gaslighting
and codependency. Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of a trend. And I really think I feel like it's a bit of a trend, and it's a money-making thing for people to revolve their businesses around.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. And look, here's my piece on that. The more we take on a label or an identity, the more we choose to do that, the more we choose to say, I experience narcissism, or I have a narcissistic partner, or whatever it is, the more we choose to grip hold of that as our lived experience, the more it's going to be our lived experience. We can only see outside of ourselves what we believe to be true inside of ourselves. Previous episode, I talked about the reticular activating system, which is a tiny little piece of our mind, and its only job is to search for evidence of that which we believe to be true. If you believe that you only attract narcissists, that will be your lived experience. It can be no other way.
Yeah, and clean up whatever it is within you that's attracting that into your life. And you'll no longer attract people with narcissistic behavior. We label things in a way of behavior, not of the thing. So for us, it's narcissistic behavior.
Codependency. The experience of.
Yes, exactly. So even with experience of anxiety or depression, like I will never say depression, like you've got depression or anxiety, I've got depression or anxiety. It's feelings. That's another, I think we could do another
episode on that. This could be maybe a two-parter episode, because there are a lot of layers to this and a lot of subtleties and nuances to what we're saying. And even how you receive this podcast episode is going to be taken in through your model of the world. So if you have experienced narcissistic behavior, gaslighting, codependency, red flags, you are very likely to have a different experience and interpretation of what you're hearing on this podcast even right now.
For sure. And for me, it feels a little edgy because, some people might be like, fuck you. And that's, again, it's not our intention.
Not at all.
It's just a conversation. Yeah. And we're bringing conversations like this out to the world and bringing it to the forefront of conversation because we want to shake things up. Yeah. Too many people are stuck in labels. Too many people are stuck in this is how something is, or I am in this experience, or this person is this way. What if we were free of that?
Yeah, that is what this podcast is about. It's to have you experience freedom in all areas of your life so that you are no longer constrained inside the cage, inside the mind, because it all starts and finishes inside the mind. Might be a good place to wrap this episode up.
Feels pretty good to me, Jen.
See you on the next one.